the wheel of time turns and ages come and pass, and books become audio, and then they come to life on Prime, and the world remembers that there are no beginnings or endings. But our characters have a beginning and an ending as season three brings us a new turning of the wheel. And I'm really thrilled to have my friend Nynaeve or Nimkins with me today to help me do a start on some serious enjoying and sharing of what we saw in season three with everybody. We're going to do everything in two parts. So I've got a no spoiler banner at the top, and we're going to start by talking without book spoilers, and then I'll give a really obvious spoiler warning so that if you haven't read the books, you can run away and we'll chew over some of the book spoiler stuff. And we're going to look at, well, at the moment, we've got six characters in mind that we're going to go through, and we're going to release all of them one by one. So before we start, Nimkins, just overall, what did you think of season three?
I loved season three. I am definitely in the ballpark of it being the best so far, and it literally just taking TV by storm this year. Um, Honestly, it's just been exceptional television. There's been moments that have brought me to so much tears. Even just thinking about it, I'm getting a bit teary eyed. I mean, there's so many incredible
Yeah.
scenes. It's some of the episodes were just jaw-droppingly beautiful and so well produced and directed. Costumes phenomenal. I could talk about it all day long. It's just been incredible. But yeah, out of the so far best season, 100%. And I'm having FOMO already. I need more Wheel of Time.
And that's why we're doing this, because while we're not getting any more new content for a while, we can, make the most of the content
Yes,
that we
absolutely.
got. So how many times have you watched it now?
Oof. I think I've watched the full season about 4 or 5 times now, which is quite pathetic, um, considering. But I have watched some episodes probably 8 or 9 times because you just
Ooh,
have to. I know, I
ooh.
know. Yeah. So it's just so addictive. But there have been some episodes where at the end you kind of have to just step away and just sit there and just contemplate life, the universe, and everything, you know?
Mhm.
Uh, so, yeah, I'm so
Definitely.
excited.
Because I binge watched the first five episodes with my non-book reader friend, my show only friend Kathy. So that would have been like the week after season five, or yeah, it must have been the week after season five episode five came out. And
Yeah.
that was a lot. But I went there in the evening and did a sleepover. So we watched, I think, two in the evening and then three the next morning or the next day. And then I went back last week and we watched six, seven, eight. And seven started, and I was bawling within minutes. And it hit me more emotionally even than the couple of I'd done watched it three times before that. And I just cried the whole way through. And Kathy cried, and that's a first. And when he finished, we just kind of got up and walked into the kitchen and we just stood there speechless, the both of us, and could hardly breathe for about 10
Hmm.
minutes. And that that is really something when you talk about someone who has not read the books,
Yeah.
who was experiencing that for the first time. And yeah, we couldn't talk. And it was.
Yeah.
And she has said that this is the best television she has ever experienced, that she,
Yeah.
just has never become invested like this in anything. So That's why we just have to talk about it for
Yeah,
a while,
100%.
for a while,
Absolutely. Yeah.
because it is the best television and it's only going to get better, folks. As unbelievable
Fingers crossed.
as that seems, I am on the. They're just fucking with us. We are getting season 4. Don't worry about it.
Oh,
Yeah,
I hope
I
so.
just I
And
refuse to believe that we're not.
yeah, the way I see it is that it's living proof cinematically that you need to give shows a chance to grow, especially ones that were produced during difficult times, and season one
The
had its,
most difficult
we'll all
times.
yeah, we'll all admit it has its issues. Um, but I still love it. But it
Mm,
does show that if you just give a show a chance, it will grow and it will develop and it will find its legs and it will just go for it. There's too much where shows are just getting cut after one season or two seasons because it's not taken off the way that particularly streaming services have expected them to go, not looking at Netflix or anything. Um, and you can't you can't it just isn't fair on the people who put their heart and soul into a show
mm.
just to end up after one season getting the axe after a week. Take Chaos, for example. I'm still not over that. But with the Wheel of Time, they've had that opportunity. They are so lucky that the faith was still there. And season 3 came and it knocked it out of the park. It made Game of Thrones look like it was for amateurs. There's living emotion in there. Every cast member is just so absorbed by the material. Everybody
Mm,
loves the
mm,
characters.
yeah,
They've gotten to know the world inside out, and you can feel that passion in their performances, how they are portraying their characters. And what more can you ask from any show? But the dedication that every element has been seen in that show, from costumes, from direction, from production, from set, from acting, script, everything.
yeah.
These people know this 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 inside out, and that's what shows need, and that's what makes season 3 of the Wheel of Time so phenomenal compared to other shows.
I'm with your sister. Could not agree more. Yeah, yeah. And we have been just so lucky, really, that they have pulled off the casting that they
Yeah,
pulled off.
nailed it.
Yeah, absolutely nailed it. And what I
And let's
love
just say,
is that while there's all that part of it, I love just getting absorbed in the story and not thinking too much about outside of the story reasons why they might have made choices and done things.
yeah,
I
yeah,
like to just go, this is what this turning of the wheel, this is how our story happened in this turning of the wheel. And the more I do that, the more gorgeous connections of everything that I find. Yeah. So we decided we talk about Rand first. Are you ready
yes,
to talk Rand? Because
yes. Let's talk
it's
around.
there's so much to say. So we're still at zero book spoilers. We're just going to talk about where Rand was at the beginning of the season and where he ended in a show sense. So you're perfectly safe to be here. So the entire story hinges on Rand. So Rand is the Dragon Reborn, and we know that completely because we've had that shown to us. And what I'm loving though is how clearly we're seeing how critical the roles of all of the other main characters are on there being a good outcome. So Rand is the Dragon Reborn, but he can't just work alone. And the fact that Lanfear has continued to be so hell bent on separating Rand from the others. Now, her motives are not quite the same as the motives Ishy had, but she still has continued, on that path. So at the start of season 3, Rand has defeated and killed Ishamael on the top of that tower in front of everyone that was left alive in Falme. He's been wounded rather nastily in the side by the dagger when Matt thought that he was killing Ishamael. Elayne's tried to heal it, but it's looking pretty bleh. He's let everyone in the world know that he can channel. So that was a
Yes.
really big ending to the season because at the end of season 1, he channeled and that was all revealed, but it was still pretty secret. There was only a very few people, who knew that, and everyone thought he was dead. Well, nearly everyone thought he was dead. But now the world knows that he is the Dragon Reborn, that he has these powers. So it's obvious that he's a really powerful channeler. And he doesn't seem too insane at the end of season 2, or most of the time at least. He's back with Egwene, but he's not actually done with Lanfear. Moraine's with him, but looks like he's trying to steer clear of her. And I reckon he would have begun the sword work with Lan on the trip to Tarvalon because it was too natural when we saw him training with Lan. So I reckon that there was some ship training as well. Did I miss anything about where he was at as we go into season 3?
Well, he's finally met Elayne, so we saw that
He
connection
has met
between
Elayne.
him and Elayne at the end of season 2. Um, so there's a little bit going on there, and he has been reconnected with his friends. He's definitely become a little bit more confident in himself, in particular as the Dragon Reborn. So when we do start season 3, we see this little bit more in control personality wise, and maybe a little bit more in command as well, or at least trying to take command. So he's not shying away as much as he had at the beginning of season 2, when he literally was
Mm.
hiding away,
He
trying to
ran.
flip.
Yeah,
Oh, he ran. He
yeah.
fled. He didn't want people to know he was even alive, and he was trying to come to grips with who he was and what was ahead of him, and he didn't want to face it. Whereas at the beginning of season 3, we see a completely different Rand. He's that little bit more in control. He wants to know a bit more about what the dragon, being the dragon, entails. And we see him even looking at the prophecies of the dragon and
Hmm.
coming to
Hmm.
grips with those, and seeing the many contradictions in them as well, and knowing that it could go either way. But I think by doing that, he is showing that he's kind of ready to step up into the shoes that he's been, forced to wear, so to speak, by faith. And yeah, so at the start of season 3, he's this completely different person to who he was throughout season 1 and season 2, and it was really interesting to see that from the start. So
I always think
yeah,
of that moment in episode 1, season 1, when Egwene walks into the wine spring inn and Rand looks up at her and he has that smile on his face, and it just was, you know, embodied Rand at the beginning of his journey of just being
yeah,
this young, innocent puppy dog. He really was. He adored Egwene. He
Mhm. Mhm.
loved his life. He loved where his life was going. The whole of life was so simple for him. He'd been raised by his father, totally agree with everything his father was about, and was going to live there, raise children there, die there,
He had his
live
whole
it
life planned
just
out.
perfect. Hmm.
Yeah, he had his whole life planned out. He could see what was gonna happen. He was gonna marry Egwene, he was gonna have the farm, he was gonna be a sheep herder all his life. And obviously, life doesn't always go the way you want it to go. And unfortunately, he spent the whole of season one internally struggling with some information. And then the
Mm.
whole of season two running away from that said information. And it's nice to see him kind of a little bit of clarity now, and that he's coming to terms with everything. Um, and like he really went to Egwene's rescue in season two, and she was so important to him. So it's interesting. It's nice to see the two of them were back together in a sense. Um, to begin season three, although I think it is questionable whether or not they were actually confirmed as in a relationship, or if they were just kind of where they were by the end of season one, when they weren't together anymore, but they still kind of were, hooking up.
Yeah,
So it
it
is
kind of felt a
questionable. Were they in a relationship? Yeah. Were they actually properly in a relationship at the start of season three, or did they just pick up where they left off? So, yeah.
yeah. I mean, they were really just kind of trauma bonded together, weren't they?
Yeah, a lot of PTSD going on there for both of them. And I think they just threw themselves together because that's what they were familiar with, but it was the wrong thing to do. And you could see it from the start of season one or season three, episode one, that there was too much tension there. It was the wrong scenario for both of them. They were clinging on to something that just wasn't right. They weren't helping each other.
Yeah.
And as much as they wanted to be there for each other, they psychologically shouldn't have been there for each other. They were the wrong two people to be with each other at the wrong time, with the amount of trauma that they had, especially with the intimacy that they'd had previously. And in particular, obviously, with Egwene's trauma. Um,
Yeah.
so they should
Because
have moved on.
I think that they should have moved on in season one, episode, what
One
was that, episode one or two, when they broke up.
episode, I think it's episode two, they broke up. That's what I mean. That's why I question whether or not they were actually genuinely back in a relationship, or if it was just like at the end of season one when they just became casual friends with benefits.
Yeah.
Just kind of there together at that moment in time. And that's not always a healthy relationship to be in, because one person will always want more than the other, or one person will be always more determined than the other.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
reality was neither of them were in it. They really weren't. They shouldn't have been. And it should have been left at that in
Yeah.
season one. But we know what life is like. We don't
Well,
always do the right thing.
this is the thing. I mean, I'm one of those that when I watch things, I talk back to the characters and can even yell at them, which to me is a really good sign that you're invested in the story that's
Yes.
going on. And Rand and Egwene were such a first teenage relationship. All right. They were not a consenting adult life partner type of
No.
relationship.
No.
But that's really important, because I think that breakup argument that they had was was perfect because they both had. I mean, the last breakup argument that we've seen, right,
Yes,
was that they both had valid points. And I loved that
100%.
because I felt that that really showed that okay, Rand did the wrong thing, but they were both really together, as we said, really because they had PTSD, because that was you know, everything that was happening, that was a little bit of something that felt like something that they had known before that they could clean, and all of those things are understandable, but none of those things make a healthy relationship.
No,
So it,
100%.
the relationship was unhealthy for the both of them, and let alone the fact that Lanfear was involved. It's like, the cake was not a healthy relationship, and Lanfear
Hmm.
was, the icing that at least it was good that she showed her hand, and
Yes.
it because that has if we then take it like to the end of the season, that at the end of the season, instead of Rand being in these intimate relationships that were not healthy, he's now in no intimate relationships.
Yes. 100%.
However, he has an army, he has a purpose, he's got all of this stuff going on, and there's no way he really can be dealing with Lanfear and Egwene
No, no,
whilst doing
absolutely
that.
not. And
Uh,
going back to that breakup that we saw
yeah,
at the end of episode 6, I want to say. Um, what I found really
6,
interesting
yes,
about that was Rand's speech to her, and everything that he said just showed that he was holding baggage since series 1 about her.
correct,
And
correct.
yeah, he was clearly still holding a grudge, and had a lot of baggage from their breakup in season 1. And I remember sitting there as he was saying everything he said back to her, because she was basically like accusing him of being mad. And I agreed with every word he said. I was like, yeah,
Yes,
yeah, that's
yes.
true. That's very true. That is exactly what the case like. And I think the fact that you could look at those kind of elements, it really makes you see how the portrayal of Rand in particular can be quite relatable for people.
Mhm.
Because we've all been through crappy relationships. We've all held our baggage for a long, long time, even
Yep,
after really bad
absolutely.
fights. We've all been there. And I found that such a great speech,
Mm,
because it
mm.
really let out how he has been feeling the whole time. And he was holding back a hell of a lot more than she had. And that moment I was like, yes, yes, you tell her, because this is all true.
Yeah,
Um,
and
so
yet everything Egwene said was also true.
yeah,
And
exactly.
that's what I loved about it is I remember I used to say that cliche saying to my children all the time: two wrongs don't make a right.
Exactly.
So like, because they were both there for the wrong reasons, they were both, caught up in so much baggage, um, that it was never going to work. However, of course, Egwene's argument was, were you lying to me, and basically having an affair. And I think that was really interesting to start to think about consent. And,
Yeah,
we've been
agreed.
there in the Aiel culture where we've seen that polyamory is perfectly normal in this world, but that's not what was going on with the whole Lanfear thing. And of course, we understand, especially I love that line from Rand. about even though I was the Dragon Reborn, I was not enough. And
I
that's
was
what
still not
Lanfear
enough.
has
Yeah,
been playing on that
the
whole
whole
time. And that's
time.
how she kept
Yeah,
pulling him back, was she
yeah,
knew what his weakness was, and she kept making out like he was all she wanted. It was him, it was him. And of course that was
yeah.
just, Lanfear only
Playing with the
only looks after Lanfear.
psychological. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
pure psychological
yeah, yeah.
manipulation on her part. But the interesting thing is, it's when Egwene accuses him basically of cheating on her. He hadn't been up until that point, when she walked in on them. And it makes you think, was the whole thing a setup?
Oh, it
Had
was
that
definitely a
been a
setup.
whole,
Yeah,
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 exactly, just to catch him in that moment of
yeah,
weakness. So,
yeah. But
mm,
it goes into that whole conversation
mm,
about how far do you go in physically in a
mm-hmm,
relationship with someone for it to be cheating.
yeah,
And
exactly.
it's not like he had said to Lanfear, "Go away, I'm having nothing to do with you."
Yeah,
But
exactly. I can't
that's
help but think that at that point he'd felt that it was already over because she had just moved out of their lodgings. She wasn't, really spending time with him. And that move of her moving out of the lodgings would have in his head probably gone,
sure,
this is it, it's done, it's
sure.
over.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Too many ifs.
So there was a lot of growth for Rand during season three. We've just talked about that intimate relationship part of the growth. Then, of course, there's that whole emotional turmoil that he's been in with finding out that his father was not his father. And he had that conversation with Lan at the beginning of the episode, about finding a place to belong. He
Hmm.
gets to the threefold land and we meet Alcera, and he forms a really fast little bond with Alcera. Well, she just latches onto him. And
I
how
love
could
that.
anybody
It's so cute.
do anything about a little girl like that latching onto him? But her death then really nearly tips him over the edge, because he's been through Ruidian, discovered his blood heritage, doesn't really understand how deep the impact of that is, either for himself or how that's going to be for the IEL. And he's so ready to just tell them who they are. And, he hasn't really thought about what breaking them is really going to mean. But everything's happening so fast, even though, of course, it's happening over days and weeks. That is still really fast to be absorbing and dealing with that sort of level of information. So even though he didn't fully understand that, I loved the contrast between him and Couladin at
Yes.
Alcaerdal, with Couladin yelling, "Let's go take all their stuff," you know. And Rand, standing there and appealing to the people about who they really are, was beautiful, beautiful contrast.
I thought the Alcardal scene was brilliant because you really got to see the insight into the Aiel's reaction to what Rand has to say, and the Cúlaidan bit where he's like, "Oh, I'm holy. It's a holy thing," and you could just see the look on the faces of all the clan chiefs going,
Yeah,
nah, this is bullshit, And then Rand comes out and he knows he doesn't really have a choice at that point because he needs to prove that he is who he's saying he is. Otherwise, they're just going to believe Culloden because he's
for
one of
sure.
them. Even though he doesn't fulfill the prophecy, he didn't go over. He didn't come from the other side of the spine. He wasn't raised by wetlanders, so he can't fulfill it. So Rand had to. He was kind of stuck in a hole there he needed to dig himself out of, and the only way possible for him to do that was to actually reveal the truth about what you see at Ruidian, much to the distraught
Yeah,
of the wise ones and Ruark. Um, and the splitting of up and of the Aiel, especially when you see them heading off with Culloden, um, and then the ones that were remaining really were the ones who had to witness the reality. And then that beautiful, oh, the way he moved doing the weaving, just
the
incredible.
gathering storm. Mm.
Oh, yes, yes. It was like just it was very reminiscent of Moiraine doing the weaves in the last episode of season 2, when she's doing that kind of martial arts type moving,
Mm-hmm,
because
mm-hmm.
apparently with the Japanese kind of styled influence in the culture, that's
Yeah.
their dance. That's what she's doing. She's doing her the dance rhythm
Mm,
for
mm.
her weaves. And I found the way Rand was moving, although probably more like sword forms or almost Tai Chi
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
um was on almost like a parallel, because there's constantly parallels between the two of those, as we've
Mm-hmm.
constantly seen throughout the 3 seasons. um and they're linked, and I thought that was a really clever thing to do, and also it was beautiful. Just the gentle movements of the arms, and yeah, although he's a little cray cray at the end. But the whole Alcardal scene for me was just beautiful. So
And it was such a contrast, wasn't it, between attempting to revive Alcera and creating that storm, right? So
yeah,
you saw him in that incredibly emotionally distraught state, trying to do something that he can't do, and then him just consciously going, this is what I'm going to do, and brings rain to the threefold land, which of
I
course
know.
is, just something totally huge. Uh,
Yeah,
and across the entire known world, you know,
they could see
as,
it.
as we heard, the dragon is one with the land, all that beautiful writing from Loyal, and here he is doing that magnificent feat. And Egwene, and of course we'll talk about Egwene separately at another time, but Egwene just
Yeah,
standing there
absolutely.
going, "What?"
What
and
is
looking around at the
going
Aiel going, "What's
on?
going on?" And then her trying to tell Rand that he has to stop. That was such a contrast, because again, when he had the bubble of Lanfear, when Lanfear attacked in episode 1, and he was
Yep.
not in control, and
No,
she was calling
absolutely
him
not.
down. And, to think there he is, all the eel that have stayed are bowing to him. He's doing this amazing thing, and she's going, Rand, stop!
And
And
we
his
had
face.
Moiraine do the same with him at the end of episode 6 with the Elsera scene.
Yes,
And he
yes.
stops the moment there's human contact.
But
It
she put a
grounds him, it
hand on
brings
his
him back to
shoulder.
earth.
Yeah,
Yeah. But that
yeah.
scene, that scene broke me. It still breaks me.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
what? Oh,
yeah. The anguish on his face at I'm
oh,
supposed to
goodness
be,
me.
the savior of the world, and I killed this little child and I can't do
Yeah,
anything
the
about it.
real
It was just
it,
horrific.
if I can bring destruction, I can also bring life, but you can't revive the dead. And oh,
Unless you give mouth to
acting,
mouth and cardio. Yeah.
or beam in and pound someone in the chest.
Yeah, that was what I meant by cardio. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it was
But somehow
virtuoso acting.
I don't think that would have worked on our Sarah either. She
Nah,
was a little bit more
no,
broken than that, than
yeah,
just
very
yeah.
broken, heartbroken. I'm heartbroken,
Uh,
broken.
yeah, she was squashed.
I
Yeah,
sobbed. I sobbed so much after that. Oh, I'm still.
I know. I know. It's it hits
It's
all the feels. Yeah.
yeah, really does.
So what's interesting is when I think about where our other main characters are at the end of season three, it feels like Rand is almost on a bit less of a cliffhanger than the
Yes,
others. Except that we
agree.
know that Leandrin has the male Adam and has partnered with Megiddian and is heading for him, right? But we know that, but we don't see that, so it doesn't. It feels like he's ended on this ta-da, here I
This
am.
big high note
But
with the
when we actually
whispering.
know what's planning and what's coming for him, let alone that he's pissed Lanfear off like severely, maybe he's not doing as well as it appears.
He pissed her off so much, her personality broke. So that scene, all I can say is it's like you just see all the different personalities of Lanfear just split away from herself in that flickering moment. When he calls her a monster and she's like, and you just see multiple heads of Lanfear. So it's like he just exposed all these
Mm,
different split personalities that she has. And I thought that was brilliantly done, so brilliantly done. And it just showed all those different elements and layers to how sick and twisted she actually became.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and his
and has been for a
confrontation with
very
her was
long time.
very long time. Um,
Yeah.
and when you look at the whole Druidian scene as well, when he's going through the glass columns and he sees her as mayor, and we see this beautifully sympathetic side. I can't help but think that that was a big influence on him leaning
Mm,
towards
it
her.
was, yeah,
Yeah, 100% in a Talar
yeah,
and Riyadh episode. So,
yeah, because he has that conversation with Lanfear and he says, I
yeah.
saw you, and
Hmm.
she's just kind of like, "Pho," you know,
Yeah.
what you just
And the
want me to
fact that
be, blah, 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 flicks it off straight
he
away.
brought her to the same location, though, in Talar and
Yes,
Riyadh. That's where they were. They were at that location
they were at the
where
site.
his ancestor had been watching it collapse.
Yeah,
So you can almost wonder if the collapse of, I can't remember what it's called. I can't
the
the
Sharon.
big giant orbit, the Jerome, um, also signified the collapse of Lanfear's herself mentally. So I've got to
Mm.
plug myself in.
I do believe we'll get even more backstory on Lanfear next season.
Hmm.
Maybe we'll get some POVs of her as she was and as things changed. I don't know, but we always need more backstory. So I've got a question for you. How
Ooh,
sane
geez.
is Rand at the end of season three?
He's going a little crazy, crazy. by the end of season three because you can hear the whisperings. If you remember in season one or season two, there's a little flicker of whispers, which you
Hmm.
know has got to be Theron in his head as he's walking through the asylum. And it happens a lot more frequently in season three. And in particular, when he's standing there and he's looking a little like he's like caught up in the magic and he's ignoring everybody and it's got control of him. And the taint has clearly got control of him. You can hear the whisperings um in, of the voices. So you just know it's starting to manifest itself. So he's not completely mad, um, but it definitely does have a hold of him. So I can't
It's hard,
fully,
isn't it? Mm.
yeah,
But
can't
he has
fully
some
agree
very
with.
lucid moments,
Yes,
and he has
yes,
some huge traumas that happen.
yeah, and they're
So,
very.
mm, so
Yeah.
it's not a simple matter of, oh, like, he's living back in the Two Rivers, living his best life and going a bit mad. There are so many layers to what's happening to him that it can be hard to pull apart what is trauma and
Hmm.
what is possibly, insanity starting on
Yeah.
him. So, Dragon
And,
Reborn, everyone knows it, even the well, now he's Kara Khan, as well
hmm.
as the Dragon Reborn.
Yeah.
And that's another thing with him is that he's fulfilling two different prophecies, and they don't present exactly the same.
Yeah. Absolutely. Because
And
they're from
yet
different perspectives.
he is obviously both the Dragon Reborn and the Kara Khan.
Yeah.
Um, he's just kind of okay. He's got his army, which he wanted, but he's also kind of doubled the weight on his shoulders, hasn't he? When you think about it from the points of view of how one part of the world is, the White Tower, so much of the all the wetlands, you could say, are going to expect him to be doing one thing, while because the Karakan for the Aiel is not really so much the savior of the world. It's the savior of the Aiel,
Hmm.
so yeah, he has really doubled his load, so to
More
speak.
weight on his shoulders.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
So anything else that you can think of about Rand that contains like no spoilers at all?
Oof. I was going to ask you which is was your favorite moment in his walking through the glass columns. Which of the flashbacks was your favorite?
Uh, that's a really good question because it just has to be the Hobbit scene.
Oh,
I've named
yes.
it the Hobbit scene.
I
How could
think
you
everybody
have
has.
somebody over 6 foot tall present perfectly as a Hobbit? They pulled it off. Yeah, yeah. I I I loved that for that kind of jovial side of it, but also because of the way it's stitched together, the Tuatha and the Aiel,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
I really felt that they did that perfectly, and that really then comes around, when we see Aram and Ela later, it just matches in so perfectly with the way we saw that. So yeah, that is definitely my favorite one. What about yours?
Oof. I Do you know what? I have to agree with you. It was just the best one. And I think we all call it the Hobbit scene.
Yeah,
However, I did really like the scene where, oh God, my brain is malfunctioning today.
that's all right.
Um, when they're leaving with all the chora trees and everything's spoken in the old tongue. And I just thought that was really lovely the way it was done. You just know everything is completely changing at this point. There's no going back. They have to do
Mm,
something.
mm,
They have to rescue, and
yeah.
they have to hide the Sakar.
Sakanen.
That's the one. Sorry.
That's the one. Yeah,
The Sakarnan. And because could you imagine if the likes of Lanfear had gotten her hands on that, or even
absolutely.
already? Oh God!
Absolutely.
So it was.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that scene because of the very stark implications and um, the horror that could occur if they
Mm,
failed.
mm, yeah.
Um, but the Hobbit scene is definitely my favorite, especially seeing as they're definitely stoned off their heads on
Oh, yeah,
something at
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
point in time.
Stone on the
So
Chora
like,
tree.
too much,
It's,
yeah, too
yeah,
too much too much leaf action going on there.
yeah. The odd laying on Arkansas grass. Yeah. um, I would also encourage everybody, whether you're a show only watcher or a book reader, to take the time to sit down with that whole section of going through the columns and play it in reverse order. So, not play it like rewind, like reverse, but play that scene first and then jump to the scene before it. And so that because we often did that with reading the books to really get an understanding of how that story fits together. It is a brilliant storytelling to tell it backwards, but you can get a little bit lost sometimes. And if you just do that once, watching it backwards makes so much sense forevermore. So, when you've got a rainy day or something and you can just sit down and just do yourself a favor and play it backwards. Yeah. I think that takes us to the end of
Yep.
what we can talk about with where Rand started and ended the season without going into any book spoilers. So
Yes.
I'm going to do my best Ali impersonation and give a spoiler warning now because we are going to change over. So it's a spoiler, baby. Spoiler, baby. I'm going to change the banner. This gives you plenty of time to go and stop watching if you're a show only so you don't accidentally get pulled into any spoilers. And we are going to spend a little bit of time just talking full book spoilers.
Excellent.
The first one
So
I'm going to
excited.
say is I called that the Hobbit scene and that was my favorite, and it is. But something that it took me a couple of watches to figure out about that Hobbit scene too is that was actually our three boys from the books,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
They were
Yeah.
that silly and that
Absolutely.
young feeling. And so
The
they
the
actually merged that in together. And the books start with such a Lord of the Rings feeling that
yes.
it was,
Absolutely.
again, you cannot even begin to explain the brilliance of how they have put this show together, because there have been people who complained, that they aged them up too much and they did this and they did that. But can you imagine trying to watch a show that actually had them behaving like that? It just wouldn't have worked. And to put it
No.
in there and see them was, that um, makes like the extra layer of why that's my favorite of the going through the
Oh,
column scenes is that they
it's
really were hobbits.
yeah, they really were, and you could totally see those as the tree from book one at the very beginning of the book when they're talking about badgers and they're up to, especially Matt is up to mischief, and
Yeah,
um
yeah.
they're totally just mucking around, but they didn't age them up that much. They only aged them up a few
They didn't
years,
age
but
them
they
up
needed.
physically. They aged them up.
Yeah,
They
aged them
aged
up
them up
mentally.
emotionally,
Yeah.
mentally, and they brought the Two Rivers i- a little bit more into
Hmm.
the current age because it really was Hobbitville, it really
Yes.
was.
Yeah. Yeah.
It like everyone was so nice and except for Senbui and the Coplans and the Kong. It was it was very
Yeah.
stereotyped, but we will always love that because that's what Rand was fighting for and protecting was that beautiful fantasy stereotype of the innocent, old time village. And
Yes.
so it was beautiful, but in the show it works better, I think, the way they did it. But they are able to throw in callbacks that just you know, kill me, just totally kill me, and are just so, that costs them money to give us those extra layers, and
Yes.
it's
The little
perfect.
nuances make a big difference, don't they? So,
Yeah.
and ugh, it was it's such a fun little scene considering the seriousness of a lot of what is going on around
Hmm.
in the flashbacks.
Yeah.
Um, especially when we start off with Rand's dad and him finding
Yeah.
Shail
Yeah.
and knowing that the baby's gone and that
Mm.
absolute heartbreak. So when you're going through all those motions of all the despair almost, um, you need that little bit of a little bit of a lift in the scene, and
Yeah.
having
Yeah.
that nod back to the way the boys are at the beginning of season or at the beginning of book one was brilliant.
Yeah.
Although I have to admit, I did miss the scene with the short spears, but to be fair, the relevance of it towards Rand himself and his direct male ancestors was probably the reason why they left that out and added in his dad. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think my big thing about this season was how much it made sense for him to go to the Treefold land before Tyr.
Oh, totally. Totally. Robert Jordan should have done that.
Yeah, like it makes so much more
Yeah.
sense. You can like
Yeah, yeah. Because he thought he
you
was
need to
writing a
have that army.
trilogy, and
Yes, this
so
is true.
it was all fine. But because it wasn't a trilogy, I've got a calendar. I'll just leave it here. Just never, never made sense. So they totally made the right call.
It was absolutely the right call because how can you take the Sword of Stone without the people of the dragon, like actual army full people of the dragon? This is
Yeah,
supposed to be an impenetrable fortress of a building,
yeah.
and
But it's still going to be
Rand's put
best to
them
be only
there.
penetrated by a few. Do you know
Mm,
what I mean? Like
mm.
you're not going to take it by, and we might still get Matt on the rooftop.
Fingers
Right?
crossed. The fireworks.
Right? There is still a possibility that it could happen. I mean, I can live if we don't, but I would love it if we do,
Yeah,
because if Matt arrives and they haven't met up yet, there could be some reason why he ends up trying to break in there. Um, Surely it won't be to rescue the girls. I think
no,
I think they've
hopefully
done a
not.
really good job of not needing people to be rescued.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe it'll
We
be
have a
Min.
little bit of rescuing, but not in the way it would happen in the books. So yeah.
Yeah, but I'm
um,
looking forward to that. And I think it was the best decision they made because it made more sense
mhm,
for him to build that connection with the Aiel before and actually heading there with an army
yeah,
as the Karakarn. And it was yeah, and it worked out so well. so well, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah.
So,
And again, they can only have so many characters for show watchers to absorb. So
hmm
random IEL all over the place and going to tier and then leaving it and taking off to somewhere, I think that this is staying more coherent. And I've got a few show watcher friends and they're having enough trouble keeping track of all the characters without confusion of why did they do that if it didn't mean anything. So I don't believe they are doing a single thing without full intention,
oh, absolutely.
which means if we see something, it's not so likely to be a throwaway. They do throwaways, and we had two character throwaways that I picked up, which was Joachim Carradine and Lady Cyane.
Yep, I
But
got those as well.
but they were not important to the overall
No,
story as people.
no.
As people. I mean, we might still get Millie. I know we're supposed to be talking about Ram, but we might still get Millie because she could now impersonate this Lady Cyane that's disappeared. So,
Yep,
it doesn't mean that we don't, but the way they are leading Rand through the story, I think makes a lot of sense because he has got layers upon layers that are building up. And we are, if I must, I really want to do like a bit of a photo journey of him, just starting with that photo I was talking about, of that grin in the inn, and just, maybe one photo per episode or something, and you would have like 24 photos of, it wouldn't be quite that many because it wasn't in every episode, but you know what I mean?
yeah,
Just that
yeah.
as you see Rand changing as he goes through all of the things that he goes
hmm
through, because they are doing a fabulous job of showing his transition
I agree.
so far. So far.
Absolutely agree. That would be a very interesting infographic to see,
Mm,
especially when you're looking at it in relation to the books themselves and his progress through the show. Because you will really start to see that smile shrink and him become
yeah,
more and more serious, um,
and troubled.
which is vital, which is very vital for his character overall and his whole character
Mm,
arc in the whole story.
yeah.
Because he starts building the walls, and I think we're starting to see those walls be built. Um, and I love that we're seeing him try to start take command
Mm,
of
mm.
Moiraine as well. And we didn't actually talk about that scene with him and
No,
Moiraine.
and that was an interesting
But it was amazing.
conversation.
Yeah,
I mean, communication in my Wheel of Time, right? They were actually
yeah.
communicating, and
Like grown-ups.
and he was letting his walls down,
Yeah,
and that surprised me when the conversation started. But when at the end of it, she said, "Yeah, no, I'm not gonna come with you and be by your side and have it seen that I'm pulling your strings." Um, so I wonder because I thought she was gonna. I was on Team Swan stilled, Moraine killed. Okay, totally wrong. So it's going to be interesting to see now how all of that dynamic changes because we know he's going to build those walls up higher, even though obviously he's
yeah,
not going to do it in the same way as he did in the book,
yeah.
right? But he still needs to. I mean, maybe we'll actually see him appearing to do a bit okay with all of that, and then we'll hit Doom as Wells.
I think we will see him be a lot more open, and um, his relationship with Moiraine becoming very side by side. And him being almost leaning on her as a crutch a little bit because they are basically tied together. But maybe his boundaries will really, really start to build even higher when she dies. Because personally, I still think she is
Oh,
going
she's
to
got to go.
die, and that
Yeah, yeah,
she's gotta,
yeah.
um, and that
And I think
there
it'll
will be
involve a
around him.
doorway.
Oh, hopefully. And I think that was just what we saw at the end of season 3 was just a warm up. Um,
It
and I
was.
think,
It was.
yeah,
And the foretelling of the eelfin talking about being wise to ask for a way out but didn't set the price.
hmm
Elida had the key on the bracelet, so the first time,
she had the
so
20, yeah,
that
she's been
that
there
that's how
twice.
she can get out. She's been there twice because she already had the
hmm
bracelet before the scene,
Yeah.
so she must have been in Tanchico at some point,
hmm
or there's more
That's
than
my
two
guess.
doorways. I believe that there's going to be more than two doorways. Um, so they would not have dedicated two scenes to Sindel if there was not going to be more significance to it. They just
hmm
that they wouldn't have done it. So we saw Elida or we saw Elida coming out of there, and we saw Matt in there. So that is going to come up again, and yeah, yeah, I think it's going to. So we've got a lot more trauma to come.
Oh no, I know, demise wells. It's gonna happen. I'm terrified. Um, I was even thinking of a party based around it the other day, and I was like, Neve, what are you doing? No, not the trauma. Walk away from the trauma. Oh,
I love
goodness
that
me.
parody that was done in the first year. The
Yes,
Welcome
yeah,
to
I've heard
Dumas
it.
Wells. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah. So do you have an opinion? And I don't know if you've heard anyone talk about this, that in the at Al Qadal, before Ram went down, just before he had that little talk with Moraine, he looked to the horizon and there was a figure on the horizon. And then she walked up and he looked back and it was gone. Do you have any opinion on who that was?
I've heard people say that it was Lanfear, but the shape of it doesn't feel like Lanfear to me. I thought it was Raven because of the way his
Oh,
costume is. You know, the
right. Yeah, we
he's
don't see
so built
much.
out. And other people have said it was Luz Theron, but once
Mm,
again, I
mm.
don't think his costume was it. The shape of it was proper for Luz Theron. I thought maybe Raven had finally spotted him and knows where he is. Um, I was just going by the shape, but
I know it
obviously
was.
he's been there. He's been in the Treefold land because he's been to Samael. So of course he's going to have a little look about. But that was what I'm going with. But I've been wrong about things like this before, so it's quite possible. Um, I'm completely wrong with this one.
We are all completely prepared to be insanely wrong on anything that we say, so
Yeah,
it
yeah,
doesn't matter.
absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it was too subtle for it to be the first time he's seen Luz Theron. I think
hmm
that we needed to understand that. I think that even though we didn't see any of Raven's involvement,
hmm
I could not assess the outline enough to say, oh, it's this person or that person. To me, it kind of makes sense that it was Lanfear in the background because Moraine was going out to put the dome over. to
Hmm.
protect him. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's that, and that is the beauty of how they're doing the show and building in so much rewatchability. Because if something makes sense in season 4, everyone will be able to go, see, we saw that, but we didn't know
Yeah.
what we were seeing at the time.
And another reason why I think it could be Raven is because Raven's going to be his main antagonist, I think, in the next season,
Next
because
season, yeah, he'll have to deal
instead
with
of Bilal, it'll be Raven at the Stone of Tyr, I think, because obviously they've killed off Samael, so um,
and it makes
it would make
sense.
sense,
It does
yeah,
make
if
sense
Raven was
because
going
I
for a
don't
calendar.
believe they're ever going to go to Camelin.
No,
Right. I know that like we saw the crowning. Actually, that's another thing I need to do a bit of a closer look and a breakdown on, because I'm sure that was the Hall of the Tower that they repurposed for that crowning. It
oh, more than
really,
likely,
it really looks like the columns and things in the background,
yeah. I
and
mean, Shudder Lagoth is Tarvalon, so
correct. It doesn't make sense for them to have to build a Camelin set just to go and kill a Forsaken when we when we need Tyr for so many other things. It makes more
Mhm.
sense to bring that Forsaken to Tyr.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
maybe he'll go looking for Raven himself will go to get calendar for himself, because there has been
yeah,
hints
that makes
of
sense.
them being and Lanfear has basically hinted at him to go do it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
this is why I was thinking it might have been Raven up there, because the outline just made it look like he was in that kind of robes that he wears. So I don't know. Maybe it is Luz Terran. Maybe it's Lanfear. Who knows?
I just hope we find out.
Yeah,
I,
please.
I just hope that there is something next season, where we're able to start, to tie it together, because again, their attention to detail is so finely tuned
Hmm.
that there was a reason for that little flash, so
Yeah,
it
yeah,
wouldn't make sense that we
yeah.
don't
Yeah,
find out
they're
what,
playing the long game. The way
yeah,
Jordan
yeah,
does
the way
certain
Jordan did.
small things, he's playing the long game. So they're doing the exact the same thing. So they're putting these little nuances in, these little
Yeah, yeah,
foreshadowing, and all these little nods and stuff, because later they will become in context, and you'll be like, "Oh, do you remember in?" And then we'll all feel like, "How did I not think of that?" And
yeah, yeah.
where there could be something we have missed completely, and we'd be like, "Oh my god, I never thought of that." But apparently we've seen all 8 Forsaken, but still can't figure them out. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah,
And
still too
and
madness.
Jordan did it really well in the books, where
Yeah.
once um, it is, obvious to the most casual observer, every time you reread. And one of
Hmm.
the things I love that they've done in the show that matches that kind of thing completely is that everybody should know who Rand's mother is. And
Yes.
and one of my show watcher friends has got it worked out but doesn't know it. Right. So has kind of worked out enough that it must be somebody from the royal family and be connected, you know, in that way, but doesn't quite know it. But I remember a lot of book fans were so upset when they put put Rand's mum in the credits as Tigraine rather than as Shael. And they were like,
Oh,
you can't spoil it like that. That's a whole big thing that it didn't get revealed till a lot later, and they've called it Tigraine. And I'm like, well, no show watcher knows what Tigraine means,
exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Do you know what? Most show watchers, they don't watch anything of the credits.
I don't
They
watch the
don't
credits, and I've read the
they don't
books.
even know that she was cast as Tigraine, right? So it's meant nothing to them. And then when Elaine and Morgaze were talking, Tigraine, her name is given, right?
Hmm. Yep.
So the connection is there. It is actually spelled out that
Yeah.
Tigraine, had left and Morgaze did the succession. It is spelled out. But show watchers, some are putting it to, and look, to be honest, the show watcher friend of mine that's putting it together lives in the UK. She lives with the royal family, on her doorstep, right? So she's more likely to start to think along, royal family lines than um, than someone like me in the colonies. I don't think about the royal family ever.
Colonies.
Although my
Do you
show
like
watcher friend
colonies?
Kathy is actually so I don't know what you call it in your country. Here we call it the Church of England. And
No,
so
it's the
she's
Church of Ireland in Ireland. It's called the Church of
right.
Ireland.
Yeah, but in the UK it's called the Church of
And
England.
it's Church of England in the UK.
Correct. And so she's a
Yeah.
Church of England priest. My
Okay.
friend that I watched the show with, right? So I am the most religion hating person, and one of my closest friends is actually a Church of England priest. Or for those of you in the US, that's an Episcopalian priest. It took
Yep.
me a while to find out. Oh, they don't call it Church of England everywhere. Why not?
It's
It's the Church of
Episcopalian
England.
in Scotland as well. So it's Episcopalian in Scotland. So
Right.
they don't call it
Okay,
the Church of
interesting.
England. Yeah.
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 But she hasn't put the royal, but I don't know that I would not call her a royalist, though, right? Even though, yeah, go figure. I mean, her and I don't talk about that stuff. Our friendship is not based on anything to do with religion, although we do want to record a episode that talks about religion and the Wheel of Time because she has some really interesting things to say about the Armelin seat, the whole White Tower structure, the
Yeah.
White
The
Cloaks,
Pope.
yeah,
Yeah. The
all of
papal,
that, all
papal
of that
city.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, um, what have you got?
Yeah.
Anything more you've got about that spoiler city for Rand and
Oof.
where he's at? Where I mean, we've done a couple of little predictions, but yeah, particularly about where he moved during this episode
Mm.
or
Well,
this
he's a
season.
free man now since episode 5 or 6, episode 6. So
Six, yeah.
yeah, so he's free for some
He's not going back
in
to either of them.
I don't think so. I think he's called one of them a monster for and the other one he's basically said although he respects her for
Yeah,
who she
yeah,
is,
yeah,
he's not even good enough
yeah,
and never has been. So I
yeah,
don't think he's going to either of those. And I think his relationship with Egwene is going to go very book centric, um, where they kind of drift very far apart and they're on two
yeah.
different polarities. Um, and I'd seen that since the end of book 2.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
so I think that's definitely where they're heading, especially with her attitude towards him in the last few
Yes,
episodes, not being very
yes,
nice.
yeah,
It's like, come on, sweetie, you bloody led him along as well, and you moved out of the room, so get with the
yeah,
program. You're just as
yeah, yeah,
responsible here. Um, so yeah, maybe we're gonna get a particular scene with a particular Aiel.
mm,
So, and I think because he's free and single now, that can go that way, and they have been working that very well. That you know, her attitude towards him is very book Avienda. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, the
Yeah.
and although I have to say I did find the character a bit lacking in this season, compared to season two. I think they're really going to play that out, and their work. They were definitely looking at the book and
Mm-hmm.
going, "Wow,
Mm-hmm.
she's got a lot of animosity towards him for no reason, really. So let's bring that in and let's really work on that, but do it, slowly in
Yeah.
this series. Let's not jump the gun." And I think that worked really well because we see it a bit
Yeah.
throughout book four anyway. The animosity and the flirting and the animosity and the
Yeah.
flirting.
Yeah.
Like she's catching herself doing it and then like go, no, no, I'm supposed to hate you. Um, so
And
bring
you
on the
saw
next
that start just a little bit with her watching him with our Sarah, right? And you saw
one.
her
And
go,
yeah,
he's handling himself okay here, so you saw just and I love that she's already, I mean, you can't say she's been in a relationship with Elaine, like they had a nice one nighter, but that there is already that connection
yes,
with her and Elaine.
absolutely. Yeah.
So a question for you. Is Min going to end up with Rand, or is
Yes,
she going to
please,
stay?
please.
Yeah, yeah. I love that she's taking a Brigitte type of role,
Mm-hmm.
right? I loved, we'll talk about, no, I'll leave that to when we talk about Elayne. Um, but I love that she's been taking that role because I think we built up getting to know Min a lot more than what we,
Yes.
did in the books. But yeah, I can't wait to see how they bring all of that in because,
I think
I would presume they're headed to Tia. They're on a ship. So
yes.
I would
They'll
presume,
all yeah.
that they went, oh, fuck, Leandrin's got the stuff. She's gone. She's looking for Rand. They believe Rand was going to Tia because that's what they said.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't change the plans till after they'd all left for Tanchico. So, so it makes sense that that's where they're going. So, Min and Rand are going to be in each other's faces again.
Yeah. Again.
And Avienda and Rand, who knows
Yeah.
where they'll be at in things. Oh, and of course, and Elaine's coming as well. So, oh, the three of them could all be in the one place. Like,
Mm.
because
No,
Elaine would have to go to Tia and then head to Camelin if she's going to go and start sorting out any
I
of the
don't
succession.
know.
Mm.
I don't know. I think Elaine and Nynaeve might head to Camelin. Because with Tom, maybe.
They were
Because
all
of
on,
what
oh,
Tom
because
said.
yeah, but they'll have to go to Tia
Yeah, they'll all
to
have to go
head.
to Tyr, but
Yeah, so
maybe the
that's what I'm
bromance
saying.
will.
She might still
Yeah,
then be heading to Camelin, but she'll have to go to Tia. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I think
Ooh.
Min will definitely meet up with Rand by the end of season four, but I think their relationship will be the main end game because Abby and Elaine will need to hook up um again.
See,
But
if they're
Elaine
all going
needs
to Tia, we get,
mm,
yeah, we get some chances, even though we know they'll
so
split
maybe
again.
we get the
Mm.
the igloo scene en route to Tyr, and then he hooks up with Elaine in Tyr, and then Min kind of joins his party from there on, and then they kind of hook up. Who knows? Who knows?
It's so
Who
good that
knows
we
what
really
way
don't
they
know.
look? But
Yeah.
Min and Rand were there was Min and Rand for me, and it was Avi and Elaine for me, and I was like, yeah, that like they shouldn't have been in a polyamory. They should have just been those two relationships. So
Have you
it
seen
wasn't
her
really.
hips? Oh, so funny.
Oh,
Ah, well, I think that we've done the right thing by deciding to split and do one
One
character at
character
a
at a
time
time.
because we thought, no, it'd be too many to do them all at once. We'll do one at a time so that we give people short snippets, and we've been recording for like over an hour and a
An
half.
hour and a half. I did say there's an awful lot to talk about round. Um, so I'm glad we kind of started off with him. But the next one's going to be interesting as well, I reckon.
So next we're going to talk Nynaeve.
Yes,
Yes.
excellent.
Great. Great,
So,
great, great. All right. Anything else that you want to throw in before we
no,
close off? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below about any of it. But if you're going to comment on full book spoiler stuff, can you please put a spoiler warning, do a few blank lines, or something like that, so that show only people can watch this and not get some sudden big spoiler by just scrolling down through the comments. That would be really fantastic. So we'll get together again, keep chewing over
absolutely.
the
Yeah,
fantastic
got a lot to
thing that
think
was
about
season
now.
3. Yes, yes,
Yeah,
I know. And now that we've done that, it brings up all kinds of thoughts about the other characters that we've still got to
yes,
talk
there's
about.
so
So
much now going through my head, but I need to make the space in my head for my final assignment for college, and now it's just full of Wheel of Time. No
bloody
surprise.
adulting. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. And until next time,
Welcome.
let's just keep enjoying the Wheel of Time. Play it in the background when you're studying. I've done that a few times when I'm doing stuff. I just, on another screen, I just have the Wheel of Time playing right through the whole season, just with the volume really low. And keep churning it over, make sure Amazon knows that we are not finished with this story yet.
Not yet. Never.
Never. There are no endings to the
Never.
Wheel of Time after all.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Mm. All right, till next time.
Thank you so much. Bye.